Newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. A Quezon City court says presidential candidate Bongbong Marcos did not pay the fines for his tax conviction. A former associate justice and Isambayan convener believes that this is a strong ground to disqualify Marcos from the presidential race. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the story.
Bongbong Marcos was convicted of not having filed his tax returns from 1982 to 1985. But now comes another question. Did Marcos pay the fines ordered by the court? The group petitioning for the cancellation of Marcos's candidacy released a certificate from the QC-RTC Branch 105, stating they have no records of Marcos ever paying as ordered by the courts. The court ordered Marcos to pay a fine of 36,000 in his deficiency income taxes with interest. One Sambayan convener and former Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio says Marcos himself has been mum on whether he paid the fines or not.
Marcos himself, through his lawyer, Estelito Mendoza, he did not present proof. He did not attach proof of payment of the fine and penalties.
Under the Omnibus Election Code, a candidate convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude is disqualified from public office for at least 5 years after serving his sentence. But Attorney Domingo Cayosa, former president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, said the clock hasn't even begun for Marcos.
Until that is paid, he hasn't served the sentence.
Marcos lawyer Estelito Mendoza told the Comelec that the order for Marcos to pay the BIR deficiency income taxes was not clear. What's clear, he says, is that Marcos should pay a fine of 6,000 for 3 criminal cases and another 30,000 for a 4th case. It's unclear whether these were also paid.
So it's up to Marcos now to present the record if he has a receipt.
For Carpio, non-payment of fines is a stronger ground for moral turpitude. He adds this further strengthens their case for material misrepresentation. But even outside the issue of the petitions, Cayosa said Marcos could still face consequences from the courts almost 20 years since the sentence.
He should be compelled by the courts issued the resolution to pay under pain of contempt and imprisonment.
Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
An election lawyer says the 5-year period for disqualification still applies if Marcos really did not pay the fines for his tax conviction case. Attorney Enrique de la Cruz told the Big Story that petitioners can use this to disqualify Marcos from the presidential race. De la Cruz adds that the 5-year disqualification period will be in effect if petitioners prove that Marcos failed to pay the fines.
Well, he can be compelled to pay the fines plus interest because the judgment in 1995 stated that pay the fines plus interest. And he can also be held liable for not paying the fines. No? And I agree, that also constitutes moral turpitude.
But here's the caveat. De la Cruz warns that if the allegations against Marcos were proven wrong, the petitions seeking to cancel his candidacy or disqualify him will be dismissed. He also said that petitioners should have included their recent findings in the allegations as the burden of proof rests on them.
Kung mali ang allegation mo, kung nagbayad siya o hindi siya nagbayad, mag-a-affect yon sa prescriptive period. No? Kasi yung 5 years prescriptive period, meaning siya ay disqualified within 5 years from service of sentence.
From service of sentence.
So kung ang sentence ay multa, mula sa pagbayad ng multa, 5 years yung kanyang disqualification. So dapat kung magpa-file ka ng petisyon na pinapa-disqualify mo siya, ikaw na petitioner ang mag-a-allege kung kailan siya disqualified.
The DILG warns campaign rallies are still not allowed, especially since the threat of COVID-19 still lingers. In the public briefing, Interior Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya said that not only it is not yet the campaign period, political rallies may also become super spreader events. Thus, Malaya calls on the candidates and the public to refrain from holding and joining rallies for now.
Nababahala po ang DILG sa kaliwat ka ng hayagang pagkakampanya ng iba't ibang mga kandidato at kanilang mga supporters sa panahon po nitong pandemya. No? Una-una po, nandyan yung banta ng Omicron variant na posibleng magdadulot ng surge sa ating bansa. Pangalawa, hindi pa naman po tapos ang pandemya.
Meanwhile, the health department is advising the public to keep Christmas parties virtual for now. Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere says it is not the time to be complacent despite the drop in cases. If there's a need for in-person celebrations, employers are urged to only allow fully vaccinated attendees. The DOH added that in-person parties are best held in open air or outdoor venues and to avoid buffets to minimize physical contact.
Natin isipin na naandyan pa rin po yung COVID-19 virus at maaari pa rin po tayong ma-infect o makapag-infect ng mga tao. Sa ating mga employers, kung sakasakali po, best pa rin to hold virtual parties, no? For this Christmas. Pero sana po we can do this kind of sacrifice.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on WOD News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. Senators claim that Pharmaly may have made ghost deliveries of pandemic supplies to the government worth 3 billion pesos. The suspicion of ghost deliveries came after Pharmaly executives Mohit Dargani and Lincoln Ong again failed to produce documents sought by the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee. Dargani and Ong are now detained in Pasay City Jail for failing to cooperate with the hearing. The panel also took note of the missing documents and fake addresses of suppliers of Pharmaly. Overseas, a Pfizer executive says he expects their COVID-19 shots to hold up against the Omicron variant. Let's get details in this interview with Bloomberg TV.
We will certainly learn about in the next 2 to 3 weeks if we get indication that the vaccine is working. Overall, we are doing 2 experiments. Number 1 is certainly that we used sera from people vaccinated with our vaccine and see if they can neutralize the virus. And second, we are screening on a global basis the effectiveness data to see if there are breakthrough cases.
How much of a change in effectiveness for Omicron is it worth it for people to wait and switch over to a new one that's tailored towards Omicron? Like, is it 10% difference in effectiveness, or what is that kind of decision process based on?
Yeah, it's not worth to wait. I think it's important that we continue with the booster program as there are recommendations in all countries. We don't expect that there will be a significant drop in effectiveness, but again, this is speculation. We will check this. We will have the data in the next couple of weeks. When you talk about booster programs, there are 3 important observations with booster program. Number 1 is that you strengthen the immune response. And number 2 is you also increase the breadth of coverage. That means when you booster, you get a better protection against new variants. That's certainly something we will also observe with Omicron.
We heard from Moderna, they were talking about a material drop in effectiveness. Obviously, you can't speak for them, but I just want to confirm you don't see it as likely that there will be a material drop in the effectiveness of your vaccine.
Likelihood is speculation, and I think because we know how difficult it is to speculate about the consequences, and I think it's dangerous to speculate and I know that this has been done in many countries. I think we should do the experiments as rapidly as we can do it, and then in a very few weeks we are knowing that how severe this disease is. If this variant is really an escape variant and takes over the place Delta has at the moment, the unfortunate place of Delta, and then we have to do the experiments, and we will have the data very soon.
Virgil Abloh, the fashion industry's highest profile Black designer, has succumbed to a rare cancer last month. Now the industry pays tribute to the man that pushed boundaries and inspired fellow designers. More of that in this report by Gemma Vansenia.
It was a kid in a candy store moment for Billy Esco when he found himself beneath the Louvre Museum in January last year, minutes before a show for fashion designer Virgil Abloh's luxury streetwear label Off-White. Esco, a 31-year-old Black American artist, musician, and clothing designer from Buffalo, New York, had made a last-minute decision to join his friend on a trip to Paris with hopes of sneaking into a show during Fashion Week. He never would have dreamed of hanging out with Abloh, who besides being the founder of Off-White, was the menswear designer for Louis Vuitton.
Virgil represented being someone that had an opinion on everything, and it was based on actual care and generosity to the actual medium instead of just being influenced by the media or by, everything around us.
Abloh, fashion's highest-profile Black designer, died last week at just 41 after a private battle with a rare form of cancer. A tribute runway show of his final collection was held in Miami on November 30. It drew a high-profile crowd, including his longtime friend, musician and fashion designer Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. Abloh was a first-generation Ghanaian American who was also a DJ and visual artist. He was not a classically trained designer and often said he drew inspiration from what he saw in the street. Esco had followed Abloh's rise over the year and appreciated how he brought together hip-hop culture and fashion, breaking boundaries at a time when styles were mostly clean-cut and traditional.
And I always felt like he was juxtapositioning two mediums, taking high fashion and mixing it in with streetwear, but more so not just because of the clothing, but the mentality behind it.
For News 5, Gemma Vansenia, we are One News.
Let's now take a quick look at today's other top stories. Stricter border controls are now in effect in the Philippines in a bid to keep the Omicron variant out. While local cases are on the decline, COVID cases are still rising globally. And Seoul seeks to be the first municipal government to join the metaverse. And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us later again at 10:15 in the morning as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now, www.signalplay.com, and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.